Hey there, Wargamers, Justin Iron Paint here, and today, boom, I'm going to talk about Battletech Aces. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in today. If you were a returning viewer, thank you for supporting what I do. Thank you for being a good Sibco, a good Sibkin, a good star mate, a good lance mate, a good all-around supporter of the channel. If you're new here, though, welcome as well. Please Alpha strike that like, subscribe button, smash it like you mean it, smash it like you're trying to take out an enemy mech, but instead we're going to channel that energy into helping the channel here grow. That said, today, let's get into what I want to talk about. So, I'm back the Kickstarter, and all the backers got invited to the Battletech Alpha Strike Aces beta test if you wanted to. So I went ahead and printed out the beta information. I want to talk about that briefly today because this Sunday, as of filming this, I'm going to try and go out to the shop, Death Designs, and I'm going to try and film a couple of solo games using the contents here to try this out, give you guys some feedback on if I like this or not, or my thoughts, my feedback, which I feel like it's going to be an interesting mechanic or interesting thing to do, especially for content creation. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. If you happen to be a backer or have access to the files, you get this little piece of paper printout, explains to you what the files are. We'll skip that for now. It's going to go over the card anatomy here. So going through what it's listing in the, let's get a little zoom in here so you guys can see. For the card anatomy at the top, number 1 here, we've got our target priority number. Which I believe the lower number goes first when you're comparing. We'll get to that in a moment. The deck name, so what type of deck you're building, in this case, a unit with the Brawler keyword. We've got, let's see, priority, oh, sorry, that was the back deck name. So back, Brawler, and that. For the fronts, we've got the same thing with the names. We've also got the movement boxes, the movement types, and the combat phase. So first and foremost, let me grab my handy-dandy pointer here. Boom. So, when you're looking at this, if you were to lose initiative and you have to go first, if one of your models goes first, they do this box. The very first model that activates, if it is part of the AI, that model uses the first box. If it does not go first, you follow this. So if it is the first model to move from your force but isn't the first of the phase, you do this. If it's the second model, you do this. Third, fourth, fifth. Now, this is my first complaint, or not a complaint, my first critique or suggestion on the surface. This only accounts for 5 activations. So what happens if you're playing a larger game of Alpha Strike that is not the core box? The core box has 8 Inner Sphere, 5 Clan. Or what do you do if there's Battle Armor? That's a whole other can of worms. I think what would have been good for this is a 1- system. So use the first number if you're only playing with up to 5 mechs or 5 units, and then a dash. So it's like 1 to 5 or 1-2, 2-. Well, I guess it doesn't work as 2-. Maybe there's a mechanic where, like, if you aren't using this and you're going to use more than 1 unit, the way that you would do is go down the list would be 1 and 2 is this, 3 and 4 is this, 5 and 6 is this, 7 and 8 is this, 9 and 10 is this. Something like that. So that you know, like, if you have 10 units, if you're the first or second, you do this. If you're third or fourth, you do this. Something like that, so that you can play with more than 5 models. I'm not sure if they've thought of this. You can't just have, like a huge number of things on here, but I would be curious. Or perhaps the other thing that they could do is say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you have a 6th activation, it starts back over and goes down. That would be simple too. That's a thought, but understanding how that works is not terribly hard. And then for the combat phase, much like this, you start on the left and move to the right. So when it comes time to shoot, you check first, is there a unit in line of sight that you can attack and you could destroy if you dealt X amount of damage to it? If so, strike that. If nothing in line of sight that you can fire at or attack is something you can destroy, then your next priority is to target the unit with the highest TMM. If they're all the same, then your next and last one is to target the nearest enemy that you can see. And it says use OV, so use overheat if possible. So that's the anatomy of the card. The other thing that is going to come up here is if you're looking at the letters next to your movement, That's down here at the bottom of our sheet here. And this is something else that I think is a little silly right out the gate. So it's telling you that G stands for ground movement, which would be like your standard move. J stands for jump. That's very obvious. P stands for sprinting. S stands for standstill. So I think that's a little silly, and this is what I would have done with this. I think G for ground movement's fine, or they could have just did M for move. M, just movements, just standard movement, just move your model, just do a move. J for jump, good to go. P, I would change to R. So it is sprinting, but I would say R for run. Because in Alpha Strike, if you sprint, you can't fire, so run. You got movement, standard movement, J, jump, R for run. I know that sprinting is a term from Classic, and it is a term that's used in Alpha Strike, but you're using the letter P to represent something that starts with an S. Run is a good approximation as an alternative word for sprinting, running, sprinting. They are roughly interchangeable, even though it's an R, not an S. The reason why I think they should change that is the last one is an S for standstill, or S for stationary. There's not really another good word for that, and if you're going to use S for standstill, then I think you should have a different letter for run or sprinting that's not P, because P sounds like it means parked, right? Like it's so unintuitive. I would not use P. That's a small thing, but I think run is going to click better in people's minds. R for run, S for stationary or standstill. So M for move, standard move, J for jump, good, R for run / sprint, S for stationary. I think that change is good. I also think G for ground move is silly. Just say move. Because if you're a mech and you do a standard move, of course it's a ground move. If you're a tank, it's a ground move. If you're VTOL, of course you're in the air. We're not using a VTOL. But if you're a VTOL, you're not going to have a ground mode where you're just literally rolling around the ground. You're going to do a move. I think they could skip G and just call it movement. M, standard move. Whatever your basic movement is on your Alpha Strike card, use that. Not J, not anything else, just move your model, whatever number that is showing. So that's my first thing. I think for new players, especially, that will be a lot helpful, more helpful and intuitive. We'll see if they change anything when this comes out. I sounded a bit more serious on that than I intended. Getting a little hyped up because I'm excited, so I don't think that's a huge critique. I think you could get used to this. I just think there's a more intuitive way to approach that. On the back here, it's got a setup. So this uses the two Alpha Strike scenarios. So you've got the Lance versus the two clan mechs, and you have the 8 or 2 Lances versus the full star of the clanners with skill 2s versus 4s and some 3s. Like, that's going to be pretty quick. Also mentions, if you use the formation rules, how you would work with it, and it basically tells you that the clanners would have lucky, and it says whenever you need to roll a 7 or better a miss, you would use the lucky. So that is part of that. This seems to go without saying for me. For gameplay, the AI golden rule, basically, if there are multiple options or whatever, you would need to determine the one that seems to be best. It says, whenever you resolve an instruction for an AI card and there are multiple options that are not addressed by the card, choose the option that will benefit the AI unit the most. If you don't do that when you're, sorry, I had that off screen. If you don't do that, and make an honest, unbiased assumption you're playing an AI-generated deck to play a solo game and you ignore this, you're just, oh, my AI mech, oh, I misinterpreted the card, he's going to be like this, so I can shoot him in the back. Like, you're just playing I win, and that's not the point. So this is good they listed it, but it should be obvious. Initiative you can deduce how to do, and then the movement phase, which is interesting for me. When you pull your cards, they have numbers on the back. So if you've got 3 units left to activate, and you're like, boom, boom, boom. Granted, that's snipers. When it's your turn to activate, the Jade Falcons go. Yeah, you see which one's lower. Okay, so I haven't done 020. That's the card we're going to do the movement for. We'll ignore the bottom for now, so you don't know who they're firing. Address this. Now it's time for the next unit to shoot. Which one's lower? 387. That model goes. And that's, you'd go down, so forth. That seems obvious to me, makes sense, and it adds a number here, because if they didn't have this, how do you know which one activates? Like, in what order? So that helps a little bit, and I think that's interesting, and all of these are going to add various variables for how your models activate and what they do, and keeps it random and fresh. I think that's cool. I think these decks are going to be pretty interesting. It also tells you with moving first, if the AI lost initiative, they have to move a unit first, and it tells you what to do. This top one, if that model moves first because of initiative and whatnot, and the priority number, then you would do this one. So pretty obvious. Flip over here. Golden rules. Some of this is pretty obvious to me, and I think it should be to you guys too. So like enemy units, when determining a position relative to a single enemy unit, the AI prefers enemy units that have already moved. It ignores those that have not. If no enemy units have moved yet, consider the position of all enemy units. Okay. Attack opportunities, unless explicitly stated otherwise, or the AI unit moves first, the AI will position itself with line of sight and range to at least one possible target that has already moved, so it will be able to attack this round. So this is a big one. Also should be obvious, but that prevents you from accidentally having an AI not have line of sight, can't fire, and making the game easy for yourself. So they're trying to make sure that you're facing models that aren't going to move out of line of sight with this one. This one's making sure you keep line of sight on something that as best as possible so you have a target to shoot. This one's basically saying that anytime a AI unit moves within reason, if it has an opportunity to get partial cover or woods and still maintain what the card says to do that, because it's obvious and that's probably what a player would think to do. Shortest path, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line unless you're going around a building or through woods. And it basically says if you can go from point A to B by going around something and get further towards your target and more efficient, go around. If going through the woods gets you further, closer towards whatever the card says by not going around, then go through the woods. So that is pretty obvious stuff. Basically, max minning and making sure you're playing this efficiently. So this is just defining some of the card or the terminology here, line of sight and so forth. We already did the golden rule. Movement modes. This is breaking down the cards, and again, I think that the S for standstill is fine. P should be R, in my opinion. Make that an R. J for jump is fine, and white G. I think the G should be an M for standard move, in my opinion. Facing, after your movement, move the unit, its facing depends on the kind of instructions followed. If moved relative to a single enemy, turns facing directly towards that enemy. Relative to a single enemy or ally force as a whole, turn it to face the majority of enemies. Basically, don't turn it stupid and keep as much stuff. If you have to face an enemy, make sure it's in your front arc. Makes sense. But when you're moving the AI, you want to make sure that, in general, as many minis from the opposing force are in your front arc as possible. You wouldn't want to turn and just barely have this guy, but have their whole force around you in general, unless something tells you otherwise. Basically, the same stuff that you would do if you were playing to minimize the opportunities to get shot in the back. It's telling you essentially to do that with the AI. It's also telling you with the movement, once you've moved a card, so let's say our Griffin has moved, he's hopped over. Once you've completed it, you'll lay it next to the unit, tapped, so that you know that it's activated. I think that with this, you could probably just use a token, but this is also good so that you don't lose track of what card is where. So that's pretty obvious. And this is going through the combat phase and what you would do. So it tells you what's going on with the damage and when it's applied, and then tells you what the icons mean and what order to do them in. So if you're targeting, if it's this one, target the model with the highest TMM or the lowest, highest point, highest move, highest range, lowest range. This one says the target aiming unit in the longest or shortest range band. Note this priority is often combined with near-far situation below to target more precisely. So, yeah. Highest health, lowest health, threat, or highest threat, shortest threat. And threat, it says target unit with the highest or lowest threat. Threat is the maximum or minimum damage an enemy unit can inflict this turn by its attack based on the range bands available to it. Usually this will be the damage value for short range, but not always. So not always. One thing that I would say for this is usually this will be the damage value for short range if in range. So, like, if I have a Mad Dog that has 6 damage short range and 4 damage at medium range, right? But nothing is in short range, then we should be paying attention to the medium range, in my opinion, because if there are things in range. So, its threat value, to me, would be a 4. I may change my opinion when I play, but, like, the 6 for short range is not a threat if it's not in short range to use it, so I think we would divert to the one it could use and compare those. Of the units that can follow, which one can do the most damage that has range to do that damage, that would be highest threat. Which one has range and damage to use that damage, but does does the lowest. So if I have a Locust at long range for 1 damage and all of my other models are at medium range and do more than 2 damage, then obviously it's the lowest threat. It's farthest away, it does the least damage in a range band that he actually has line of sight and range to use. So that's a small thing, but to me seems obvious. Got that done. So situations, another little dealio here. These icons are simple. Yes, no checks against conditions, it says. The enemy unit meets conditions, so near, far. Enemy unit that is physically closest or furthest on the table, seems obvious. No cover, can crit, can destroy. This one's interesting because technically you could crit anytime, but that's not how they interpret it here. This says enemy unit that the attack will inflict a critical hit, i.e. inflict 1 or more points of damage or structure damage upon or completely destroy if the attack hits. So if you're firing at a unit that has, you will go guaranteed go internal, then you know you can crit. The other thing that I would say, like, this could be slightly up to interpretation, or maybe the verbiage changes, because if you're a model that does like 5 damage and they have 1 armor left and you'd go internal, I feel like you could crit. You only got to do 2 points of damage to get the crit. So that's a little bit more gray area. Maybe that's more of a house rule, but that, I think that could be a determination, like how likely is it for you to crit. If they have 2 armor, 1 structure, or 2 armor before you get destruction, you can deal 3 damage, and the 3rd damage would do a crit. You're a bit more unlikely. So some of that's gray area. We'll see how the final verbiage is on that, but I think that's fine. Combat instructions, additional ones, use overheat. The AI will apply as much of its overheat value to the attack as it can when you have to do it, but only as much as needed to be able to destroy its target if the attack hits. For example, an AI unit with damage value of 3 and OV of 2 attacks a target with 4 structure following the will destroy using OV instructions. It will spend 1 overheat to increase its damage to 4. This does make some sense, but I also think that usually if you're trying to overheat, and this is one I'd probably change, because can destroy versus will destroy are 2 different things, if you roll well. If you can do 4 points of damage with an overheat and you only need to do 4 to kill, but you could overheat for 5, in Alpha Strike, for me, I almost always would do the 5 because law of averages. I don't want to bank on getting specifically what I want to roll. I want to roll a little bit more to guarantee if I miss one, I still get there. And I think if you want to make the AI a bit more competitive or a challenge for you, I think that should be a clause. I don't know exactly how you would word it, but I think that makes more sense. To exceed or go over. Now, obviously, I don't want you just overheating, doing dumb stuff all the time, but I think that one could use a little bit more thought into making sure that the overheat value makes sense and is doing maximum efficiency. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm being overly critical here because I'm a player and I want to, you want to tailor the AI to be as challenging as possible without being impossible to fight, because if you're doing it, you want it to be fun. If it's not a challenge, then it's just like you taking your little G.I. Joes and you're like, my Space Marine's powerful, my Archer could win, and then you're just saying who wins, right? So if the AI isn't a challenge, it feels like there's no point to doing it. The more challenge you can get it, the more locked in you can get to the mechanics here, the more rewarding I think it's going to be when you play against it, and the more it's going to feel like it emulates player decisions better. And some of this, if they don't do it, make house rules, make good determinations, because like that right there, what I described for this, if that's what I would do, and I'm playing against myself, okay, the card says, or the rules say that I would only overheat for 1, if I only needed to do 4 to kill it. But if I feel like my gut says if this was me, I would do 5 to try and guarantee the kill, screw it. Nothing says you have to follow every rule every time and everything, as long as you're not cheating someone. But in this case, if that makes it more challenging for you and you think that's the best tactical decision, flub it a little bit and do that and make it more challenging for you when you're trying to play against yourself. The final pieces of the puzzle in the document are given some examples of things that you can do. Pretty obvious stuff here. And then you've got some additions on how you can increase the difficulty, which mostly just ends up adjusting the skills. So you could build the forces more, but because you're kind of locked into doing the Alpha Strike box set, you're limited on building, and then you can increase their ratings, which is really going to do it. So you can make... sorry, that's less challenging. My bad. For the other one, this is where I'm at. So you could give them more point value than you, and decrease your skill rating or the skill ratings of AI. So like if you did that with the clanners, like they go from 2s to 1s, they're gonna really poo-poo on you. But it does give you some preliminary ideas for how to adjust it. I think that's gonna get a lot of tweaking, but it's very interesting that it's there. Now, for the cards, I'm assuming there's going to be way more cards here, but we've got a couple of decks here. Let's grab I didn't sort these. This was now I do have a benefit of where I work. We have an ability to. Oh man, I might start putting striker and sniper in the same thing. I think I did. We have access to a lamination machine at work because we've done a lot of in-house like small indie games and stuff like that before. So we have one to be able to handle custom things of this nature. So you guys at home might not. If you do print out the rules for this, don't stress too much if you don't have this. You can get card sleeves, get clear ones or transparent ones you can see through. These are folded in half pieces of paper, so there'll be 6 cards to a sheet, and they'll be lined up like. No, not 6. Was it 3 cards? 3 cards to a sheet, I think. Sorry. They'll be lined up like this, and they'll look something like that. And then when you cut them, you'll fold them, right? So you'll fold them. So if you've got some sleeves, you just throw them in there. And if you can see through the back, because this number is important, and there should be, I think there are. Is it 7 or 8? I've got 6 here. Oh wait, brawler. Skirmisher, brawler, skirmisher. Okay, so we've got, I think there's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so I think there's all going to be 8s. Whoop, that was 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 8. There we go. I keep getting mixed up the striker and the sniper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we got all those. So when you would play, you would shuffle these. You'd lay them next to a unit. We've only got 5 types of cards here, and if you recall, one of the scenarios uses 4 types of cards. But one of the scenarios has 5 clan mechs in it. So let's see what we've got here. And this is a scenario right from the book, or from the Alpha Strike box. So you've got a Nova Cat T, which is going to use the Brawler deck. We got it. And then the Pouncer Prime, which is going to use the Sniper deck. So there's your decks. For this one, we have Brawler, Skirmisher, Striker, Sniper. So the Brawlers are going to share a deck, is what would happen. You could ostensibly print out a second set of these if you want to have more variety on the minis, but I think a single deck's probably going to do fine for this. Also, you won't have to worry about duplications of priority and coming up with a thing for that. So let's say hypothetically, you go to setup. So you got your deck here. Just kind of randomize that a little bit, and then boom, you go to activate, you flip. You don't want to see the bottom because you don't want to know what it's going to be doing. Keep it fresh for yourself. And if this guy goes first, it says if first you would jump to most enemies in line of sight and woods and cover for most enemies. So make sure you can see as many enemies as possible and seek cover or woods if possible. It doesn't say that you need to jump straight towards them. It just says jump to most enemies in line of sight. So I would interpret this as being get into a vantage point to see as much as possible and have a defensive position because you have to activate first. Jumping gives you the bonus for TMM. Logic dictates that you're trying to get a good vantage point to see as much as possible because things are going to move relative to you after you've activated, so they may not be there, and you want to make sure you don't put yourself in a position to get killed. So that is the way I would interpret it. If it didn't activate, it's first for the turn. It was the first for your side. Then it would do a stand still if no enemies within 16 and at least 1 enemy's in line of sight with TMM 1 or less. This says if, so I would assume, let's see, because it says if, let me find the thing, because it says stand still. I would assume if there are no enemies, I think it says you would always move towards the nearest. Let's see here. There's an example of this, so I don't need these two. Movement phase. That's not it. There's the thing. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So it says if there are multiple ways to resolve an instruction, refer to the following row and use the row's instructions as a tiebreaker to help decide the best target point for where the AI unit should move. Continue doing so until there's a clear best option for it. So it uses the following, which I'm assuming is 4. Okay. That doesn't necessarily answer. I thought I found it. Just okay, so it says to refer to this as the like golden rules as a breaker. So if this guy has to be the first model for your side that you activate, it says stand still if no enemies are within 16 inches and at least one enemy is in line of sight with TMM 1 or less, stand still. If not, it says to use this as the tiebreakers on things to do. So like enemy units determining what you would want to do, positioning so that, you have at least one enemy unit that you could see or target. I feel like the next thing that you should do is to go down the list, but that, actually, you know what? Because that says activating 4. What if it was the 5th activation? Then what do you do? Because I thought most of these had 5. Yeah, this is getting a little confusing. Yeah. Yeah, that's weird because they only gave you 5. But so what if you or 4 on this guy? So what if he activates 5th on your side, right? Let me see if I read that incorrectly. So we got page 3, we got page 2, 1. All right, let's take a peek at this and make sure I didn't mess this up. Moving priority, move first box. So A, what to do? Movement type icon, movement instructions. C, which is this stuff. Okay. I thought I had this down pretty well. Perhaps not. 2, movement phase. All right, so the priority order, when the AI team's turn activate, complete the priority number, blah, blah, blah. Flip that unit's card over and refer to the movement phase section. Do not read the combat phase. Resolve the instructions in the first box. Otherwise, read the rows of the movement phase section one at a time to check if they apply or if they create one clear position. Oh, okay. Got it. I misinterpreted this. I thought I read it incorrectly. I thought it was like you do this one first, and then if you don't go first, you do this. What this actually means, and I'm glad I read over this, we're learning it together, is if you aren't the first to activate for the turn, if you are, when you come to activate for your phase or your side, you try and satisfy this one first. If you can't satisfy this one, you go to this one. If you can't satisfy that one, you go to this one. If you can't satisfy this one, you'd find some tiebreaker, but there should be no way that that one would need anything. So I think they've probably designed this where there are minimal options or cases where you would have to reserve or revert to this chart here, because this one says refer to the following row and use that multiple ways. Yeah, actually, I think it might mean the next one. I don't know. We'll have to try it out. I think it actually means go down the list, and then if there's competing stuff, make sure you choose the best decision possible. I think that going to the golden rules for this and the attacks is going to make the most sense if you're trying to determine what it is you think your mechs should do. So with that said, I think this is going to be an interesting thing to try. I think for the channel, when I can't wrangle people to play with, this is going to be very fun. If they have this in the Kickstarter as an add-on in the backer kit later, I'll probably buy everything they put out with this. Whoops, I just threw all my cards on the floor like a dummy. I think I will buy probably everything they put out for this because it's things that will help me generate content for the channel, especially once you can build decks of your own and cover all the different unit types and see what happens. So I think this would be very cool. It's also interesting that it says V3, so I'm assuming that they've been doing some internal testing before it has hit the Kickstarter, and we're probably the first outside of their group to try it, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think this would be a lot of fun. If you're a backer, I highly recommend you download the rules. You can also play this cooperatively, so you and a friend can play the allied forces together against the AI. So I think that'll be really cool, especially if you want to enjoy playing together and not against each other. I think that'll be fun. So yeah, I'm very hopeful that it works out. I think it's going to be fun for the channel to generate some content when I don't have someone to film with. And let me know what you guys think if you back the Kickstarter. If you have downloaded the rules for this yourself and are checking it out, if I interpreted something wrong or stupid, or you were curious about how I deduced my way through this with my inability to read and comprehend super well, let me know. As always, though, folks, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. We will get some content using this in the future. We'll have at least 2 videos because I'll do both scenarios. I think that'll be fun. If you want to help support what I do, check out Fortress Miniatures and Games. Anything and everything Battletech related, he's got you covered. If you want to help support me in my day job, check out Death Ray Designs. If you want to pick up some paints, check out Monument Hobbies. We got links and descriptions down below. As always, though, it's time for me to sign off because you guys know if I don't, there's a high probability I'll continue to sit here and ramble, and I think I have rambled long enough. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. As always, keep rolling those dice, keep painting your models, and I will catch you guys next time.